Jessica, thank you for joining me today on the Courage of a Leader podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation that we are going to have about authenticity. You and your company, Impact Engine, are different. You stand out in your industry. How did you come to understand who you wanted to be? Because it's not necessarily a common blueprint in your field.
Yeah, I think in terms of who I wanted to be personally and kind of
Yeah.
what I want to do, who I am, how I act, I feel like that's just sort of hardwired. And I'm not a good actor. Like even if I wanted to be something else, like I think it would be really hard for me.
Yeah.
Um, just in terms of how I show up. I think in terms of my career path, certainly there's no blueprint for it. These are industries that I've spent my career in that didn't exist when I started my career. But I would say that I just have been very fortunate to kind of always have a kind of a common thread or a North Star, kind of pulling me along or keeping me kind of focused and guided. And that is my obsession with how capitalism can be a tool, and be better for the planet and for people. And so that has really kind of what's made my career authentic, I would say, is
Ah,
kind of that combination of like being authentically motivated to do this type of work, and then kind of the inability to be anything other than myself or to bring energy to things that I'm not authentically motivated about.
yeah. How did your North Star emerge for you?
So I actually, when I was an undergrad, I majored in public policy. So I knew I wanted to make the world a better place, and I really honestly believe that in order to do that, I would have to work for government or nonprofit,
Okay.
and probably against capitalism, sort of there's
Okay.
the evil, piece of uh, of society. And I was very fortunate to my senior year take a course. I cross-registered from Haverford College, where I was at Wharton, which we were allowed to do. Took a course on urban economics, where I read a paper by Michael Porter from Harvard Business School, and it was just the late '90s, so it was kind of one of the first sort of credible business leaders who kind of came out and said capitalism can be a tool for good. And his paper was about applying capitalist sort of thinking and investment thinking toward creating sustainable jobs and wealth in high poverty urban areas. It was called the competitive advantage of the inner city. Um, and it was sort of a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, oh, why is this something we have to work against? Why isn't it something we're leveraging? And it felt so optimistic and promising to go down that path, because whereas governments and nonprofits have been sort of trying to solve a lot of
Mhm.
these issues with essentially the leftovers from capitalism for
Mhm.
so many years, sort of it was a relatively new concept to sort of say, what if we use the actual engine of capitalism toward these same directions that we want to go as a society?
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, that was the light bulb moment, I guess, that helped kind of create that focus.
It had to be exciting, but did it also take courage to pursue that? Right? Because I mean, sometimes those initial papers, those initial
Yeah.
folks that are thinking about something in a new way, like, is it going to take hold? Is this
Hmm.
possible? Right? Is this just a nice idea and we're not going to be able to get a tipping point here?
Um, yeah, I think uh, for me, it took courage, but courage sort of in a different way, in that um, I was 100% convinced that that was sort of the right thing to do, the right way to think about it. It took courage to go, essentially I went and knocked on the door of the organization that Michael Porter started to bring those ideas from that paper to life, and said, like, I need to work for you. I believe in this. Like,
Ah,
I want to
great.
do
Okay.
this.
You went to the
And
source.
I
Yeah.
had I had jobs at think tanks in DC. I had offers, and that was going to be my path and do public policy. And it was sort of tried and true. And
Mm.
um, so it wasn't so much that there was a risk in my mind that like the concept wasn't good. It was more just like, to put yourself out there and say like, I have these like safe job offers, but I'm going to actually go try to get somebody who doesn't have a job posting even to like hire me to do
Yeah.
this because I just really want to do it.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably where that took more courage,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what led to most of my jobs in my career is sort of just having very clear kind of belief in the, call it the movement or the idea, which
Hmm.
gave me the conviction and the courage to then go act on it and try to like get other people to let me act on it.
Yes, and you have created positions for yourself along the way.
Yeah.
Jessica, let me pause us here and tell our listeners more about your background, and then we'll talk about where you're at today. Jessica Droste Yagan is the CEO of Impact Engine, an investment firm with a mission to bring more capital to a market where financial returns are linked to positive social and environmental impacts. Impact Engine manages venture capital and private equity strategies that invest in transformative for profit, positive impact funds and businesses. Prior to Impact Engine, Jessica led the creation of McDonald's Corporation's global and U.S. sustainable sourcing strategies. At McDonald's, she enabled the integration of ethical, environmental, and economic sustainability across all food and packaging sourcing. Jessica also worked in the field of urban economic development through the city advisory practice at the Initiative for a Competitive Inner City. Jessica has authored 2 Harvard University case studies on public-private partnerships and currently serves as a board member for the Metropolitan Planning Council, the Rostandi Center for Social Sector Innovation at Chicago Booth, and Fixer. Crane Chicago Business named her to its list of 40 under 40 in 2013, and she served as a 2014 Leadership Greater Chicago Fellow. Thank you for being on the podcast today, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us about um, who you are today, what's important about Impact Engine, what makes that authentically you.
Um, yeah, well, interestingly and not surprisingly, one of the values at Impact Engine is authenticity. So it's
Right.
um and you know, it's probably circular in the sense that I couldn't be in an organization that doesn't share that. And also I've helped build the organization and it's a very important value to me personally.
Yeah.
Um, so you know, as you kind of shared in my background, you know, today and for the last 10 years, I've been focused on impact investing, which is, you know, using the investment lens as one tool within capitalism to apply this idea of aligning financial and social returns. Um, and over the past 10 years, we've really been focused on building out this industry and this field, imagining a different way to build an investment firm, different way to invest, and helping to bring that to life, and hopefully helping to bring it to life with other firms and, you know, investors as well, because we want to see the whole field grow, and that's what's been happening. It doesn't really do any good if it's just us, but if we can sort of you know, spread the word that, you know, it is possible to think this way, and to do things a little bit differently. That's kind of the goal. So we've grown the past years from 1 million to about 240 million in assets
Amazing.
under management. And that is reflective of the growth in the industry overall. It's really great to see more and more people sort of realizing that you can really be intentional from the beginning about what am I investing in? What's happening to this capital? What is it going to go
Yeah.
do in the world?
Yeah.
And you can do that in a way where you can still make money and also, you know, have more positive impacts.
Yeah. Have it be that win-win-win. So that's the stand that you have. What challenges that, Jessica? What real, challenges come in day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I think change is hard for people, you know, in general. This
Mm,
isn't the only example of that.
sure.
Um, I would say that, you know, similar to political beliefs, religious beliefs, the way people think about money and capitalism is very, very ingrained.
Yeah.
And even though um, it's just a structure that was created and we decided to all believe in, and um,
Mm-hmm.
there's sort of this idea, and particularly around Milton Friedman's perspective that gained traction decades ago around like the only role of capitalists is to make money, to make profits for shareholders. And that's it. Sort of ignore everything else. Um, and I think that is what is ingrained in people's head as sort of like the truth. And it's sort of a brick wall sometimes. There are scenarios in which that could be quite successful to think that way, in the sense of if you think really long term, I think what's good for shareholders is also what's good for society.
Mm-hmm.
But in today's world where a lot of investors have no idea what they own in their mutual fund or 401k, there's intermediaries doing it for
True.
them.
Yeah.
Um, Many of them are not holding it all long term. Obviously, if you're holding a company for a week, you don't care what they do to employees or the environment,
Mm.
and it's not going to affect you and your financial outcome.
Yeah.
If you're holding ownership in a company for a year, 10 years, 20 years,
Mm.
obviously you can see how thinking about these other stakeholders is going to really matter for your financial outcomes.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's part of just like finding these ways to draw the connection for people of like when and where does this philosophy of aligning financial and social return make sense? Um, and part of it is, time frame, part of it is kind of how engaged you are as an investor, and there's other dimensions. But breaking that down is probably the first and biggest barrier.
Yeah, this mindset, this perspective that has been so widely held about it's about making money. And then how many different ways do we hear a version of the phrase, Jessica? It's not personal, it's business.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to bring our
Mhm.
personal values to our business decision making. And yeah, okay, appreciate these levers that you're looking to longer term, right? How are people engaged with their investing? Educating them about what's possible. Who are these companies? What do they stand
Mhm.
for, right? What kind of social impact are they having? Whew. What are the benefits to anyone listening, Jessica, to be really clear about who you are, even if that means, hey, I look a little bit different than the
Mhm.
fellow analysts next to me or the other companies in our industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of all, personally, I think it just feels good to
Mm,
align kind of
yeah,
what you believe and what you do. Um,
that's
there's a
a huge
quote.
benefit, right? That I mean,
I often there's a quote from Gandhi where he says happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony.
oh, that alignment.
And I think that's very true. I think there's a sense of like alignment that we feel personally in ourselves that just feels good. And I think
Mhm.
um it also really clarifies things for the people around you. Like if you're just like, this is who I am, this is what I believe, like
Yeah,
there's no mystery what you get if you want to work with me or be my friend or join
yeah.
into something I'm working on. Like it sort of is what it is. And I think that kind of clarity can be really useful in our society, which is sometimes not as transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think to your point about allowing people to bring their values to their business work, um, being able to draw the connection between their values and successful financial returns is what allows that connection to be created. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sort of talked to people where it's like they're almost saying, explicitly or implicitly, um, I wish I could bring my values to work. Like I have these values, but I can't because this is business, this is investing. They're not allowed to. And I
Wow.
think when you show them real examples of actually, here's how these things can go together. Here's how you can actually do both. You're not giving up business success and you're not giving up financial returns. You're adding in and you're looking for where they work together. It's like almost freeing to them of like, oh, I can bring these parts together. Like I can live sort of with one brain.
Yeah.
And I love seeing people kind of get the enjoyment out of that personally. Aside
Yeah.
from like moving capital in this way, which inspires me.
Yes, yes. So can you give us one of those examples, Jessica? Like if someone's listening and, they've got money invested in a certain way, like how can they start to get more engaged, more intentional about how they invest?
Yeah, for sure. And I would say this could apply to any, even whether they're investing or they're in a corporation and they have some kind of role where they can kind of look for these overlaps. But
Right.
um, so, for example, in the impact engine portfolio, we look for business models where positive impact is what's driving sales or what's driving financial returns. So, for example, we have an investment in a company that sells software to grocery store chains to reduce food waste. So it's essentially an inventory management software. It helps them know what to order and put on the produce shelves that's going to actually sell versus get wasted. So it allows them to increase their sales, reduce their waste. So that's obviously the financial case.
Yep.
And the more they reduce waste, the more environmental impact they're having. So it's sort of win-win. Or we have an education technology company where, it's a education software that, is actually shown through research and a randomized control trial to be extremely effective for kids to reduce reading loss. So it's a tutoring and literacy software.
Yeah.
And the fact that they can prove that it is a positively impactful product actually helps them sell more to school districts who need to improve
Sure.
literacy loss or close the gap in literacy. So look for that kind of connection between the two, where it's not, I give a percent back to charity or buy one, give one. It's like the product itself that drives revenues and sales is also the very thing that creates the positive impact. So that kind of removes potential tension.
Mhm.
Where if it's a we'll give back to charity, then it's sort of like, okay, well, we don't know what the impact is of the product. And if you have a bad quarter or a year, you're probably going to cut back on the charity.
Mhm.
If the impact is driving your business
Mhm.
success, you're going to protect it. You're
Mhm.
going to scale it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those wheels are rolling in the same direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jessica, am I hearing like, as we're taking in our news, as we're hearing about businesses, as we're talking with just neighbors and friends and people that we know, like we are on the lookout for companies where their positive impact drives sales. And we can also be asking our business advisors, like in looking
Yeah.
at our portfolio and who are these companies? Like dig in. Is there
Yeah. Who are the companies? What are the things in your function, wherever you are,
oh,
what role you're playing in your business? I mean, an example from supply chain, where I've spent almost 10 years as well. Um,
yeah,
you know, McDonald's wants to obviously protect quality and food safety, reduce costs, improve resiliency, right? You can't have interruptions where you can't serve something when people come to McDonald's. You have it. So an example there from my time at McDonald's is the coffee supply chain where um, most of the coffee is coming from Central America for the US coffee blend. A lot of Central American farmers were, not making enough money to invest in their farms, protect quality and food safety, keep their kids there to teach them farming as opposed to sending them to the city to get some kind of other job. So
yeah,
their supply chain was at risk, right? It's more at risk for disease. It's more at risk for some other kind of threat to continuation to be able to produce that coffee. Um, so McDonald's invested in technical assistance programs for coffee farmers in Central America in order to improve quality, yield, that should improve their profits, but also the resiliency of that supply chain. So that's an example of where, you're sort of in this role and you're thinking like, how do I protect this important business asset, which is
mhm,
a resilient supply chain? And then you find these ways in which answering that question overlaps with, you know, humans and planet and protecting them at the same time.
yes. Yeah, protecting those relationships. So, I mean, we can look at suppliers, we can look at vendors, we can look at whom we supply, right? Who our customers
Yeah.
are, if we're somewhere in the middle of that chain
Yeah.
to the consumer, right? And yeah, what are their practices? What's their outlook for their longevity? What are their business practices? All of that. I love,
Yeah.
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 I love that invitation for us all. I like that we're tying this to authenticity and what's important to us. Like this all ties to our values. And
Yeah.
I am glad to know that in our marketplace today, values is a more prevalent conversation than it once was. And it's not rocket science, it's some reflection and some time with yourself, folks, right? To really get at what's core to you, right?
Mhm.
What excites you? What's important to you? When things are working in your life, your values are naturally present there. So keep looking, keep observing, identify those values for yourself. And then how do you create and encourage the relationships that are going to help fulfill on your values? I want to loop back to the benefits, Jessica, because you said it feels good. I talk with many leaders that are looking to influence things with their teams or with their team members, their division, a direction they're taking at things. And, sometimes we don't have complete control, but we're trying to influence things and we're trying. And it's all about, I've said this many times, how do you feel when you put your head on the pillow at
Mhm.
night? Right. And we know when we know that we have business relationships that are also fueling our individual values, that feels great.
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
It's also fun to tell your kids about.
Oh, good. Yeah. Mom, what do you do for work? What's important about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I know, you have preteen and teenagers. What kinds of conversations do you have with them?
We talk a lot about just kind of whatever they're doing, whatever they're working on, or whatever path they choose for career, that it's important to matter.
Yeah.
Um, so matter is one of our family values, and sort of we try to explain it as like, you know, have it make a positive difference that you were there. And it doesn't really matter what industry, what role. You can really be anywhere, right? You can it could apply to anything,
Yeah.
but kind of take it upon yourself to ask like, what can I do in this role that really matters, that like makes things better.
Yeah.
Um, and I think being able to share, my husband and I both like, and this is kind of how we do that, or how we try to do that,
Yeah.
and kind of um, having it be like a shared responsibility or goal really helps, as opposed to obviously like saying, oh, you should go do this, and they're like, how, like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not doing that. But no, we can be like, no, here's how we're doing it.
Yeah. But what's important to you, right? And
Yeah,
how do you
exactly.
matter? Yeah. And Jessica, if we do look across your career, you have found ways to show up and make the kind of difference that you've wanted to make in in the city, in a food industry, in the financial industry.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Indeed, you are. What advice would you give, Jessica, to a leader that is, just has been in the churn, doing the work, right? And they might wake up one day and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not sure that what I do matters anymore. Like
Mhm.
I want to be more intentional. I want to be more authentic here, but I'm in the midst of like responsibilities and projects rolling forward. What advice would you give?
Mhm.
How
I
could they
mean,
have a light bulb moment?
I think there's a couple of potential directions, right? I think for some people, for whatever reason, they can't make a fundamental change to the pace of their life or the job they're in. They're supporting other people, or maybe they don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
I think even in that case, there's always options to how you show up in that role that you're in right now. So even without changing jobs or careers,
Hmm.
how do you show up for your teammates, for the people you work for other stakeholders? And are there things you could do there without fundamentally changing anything about the structure,
Yeah.
that could give you more of that feeling of matter and alignment with values? And I think there are people who have choices, but for whom it's just too overwhelming. Meaning they could have choices, but the idea of like, oh, I've been in this career or this company so many years, and like it's kind of scary to what is even out there? Would anybody else hire me? What else could I do? What does that mean? I guess for those people, if you have choices, I would really encourage you to at least explore them.
Yes.
At least explore them, even if you don't act,
Yeah.
really put some actual time into reading, talking to people, following what does sound really compelling to you, and just seeing what
Mhm.
happens. Because I think I talk to a lot of people who are in this latter position of like, I want to do something impactful. Kind of, here's my background. Like, where do I go? And there's never ever been an example of someone I had that conversation with where we couldn't come up in like a 30-minute conversation with several paths to go down,
Yeah.
other people to talk to, things to
Right.
explore that were very relevant and connected to where they're coming from and could be a place to go,
Yeah.
that feels better to them. So
Yeah.
I think there's sort of, I guess there's just more than you think, maybe more than you think out
Yeah.
there. That's,
I love that, Jessica, because that's a really two-pronged what you said. Look at how you can show up differently where you are, right? If you've got a value of collaboration, right? How do you
yeah,
show up differently for that? If you've got a value of respect, and you're just taking time to listen to team members, right? There are ways that you can intentionally show up in the environment that you're in.
yeah,
And if you've got choices to explore, explore them, read about them, talk to other people, right? Like, oh, I always kind of wondered, what it would be like in that industry. Well, who do we know? Who can
yeah,
we talk to? Do some exploration because yeah, it's worth it to feel personally fueled by what's most important to us day to day. And we can really intentionally bring that. And we can see if there are ways that we can set ourselves up inside of a system, a structure, a role, an organization where it's easier to bring our value, demonstrate our values day to day.
absolutely.
Jessica, that's a really great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining me on the Courage of a Leader podcast today.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for including me.